All right, everybody. We've got two very special guests for you this week, and also two new very special guests. That's always fun. Everybody, welcome to the show Shawn Lewis and Rion Mosley. Welcome, boys.
Hey, how's it
Hello.
going?
Thank you for having us.
Hey guys, thanks for taking the time. It's nice to have two new guests because we've been doing this for a little bit now. So, and when we have new guests, unfortunately, we have to put you guys through the gauntlet of doing a little bit of an origin story, or at least how you guys got working together.
If you don't remember your first comic, then I have to kick you off the show.
Yeah,
we
don't have to go that far. But I don't know if you just want to give us some insight into, like, what got you into comics. How did you get here, working together, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Whoever wants to go first.
Shawn, up to you, brother.
I've always been a comic fan. I remember as a kid, there was a place we used to get it. Me and my friends would always get our comics at Fruth Pharmacy on the old metal spinner rack.
Hell yeah. Yep.
Every Wednesday, go down to the Fruth Pharmacy, spend like 3 hours just looking through them, deciding which two you were going to buy because you didn't have any money, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So always been a comic fan. The first time I really ever thought about writing comics or thought of comics as kind of an art form other than the art itself, because I can't draw to save my life, was Frank Miller's run on Daredevil, where the Kingpin finds out that Matt Miller's the Daredevil. I've still got those issues. That's some issues I would never get rid of. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Loved it. The greatest writing to this day that I've read in a comic, in my opinion. Always loved him. Kind of fell out of it a little bit, in and out of it a little bit, with the spec market and how it got kind of weird for a while there and all that.
Yep.
Back in about 2005, I started getting back into indie comics, and I was reading one from Dakawaka, a company out of New Jersey. Well, they ran a contest, finished the last 5 pages of this issue for us.
That's cool.
So I submitted, wrote the last 5 pages, came in third, didn't even win. But the owner was like, "Hey, I like what you're doing. It just doesn't fit our story, how we were going, where we're going with it. But if you have anything else, send it to us." So I sent him. I had done just a kind of a spec script called Force 51. Sent it to him. He liked it. They published it. Didn't lose any money. Didn't make any money, but didn't lose any money, which, for an indie comic, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah, right. It's not bad. Yeah.
So we did that. He liked it. Said, if you got anything else, put it together, send it to me. I'd worked on some screenplays and stuff, never done anything with him, just writing, kind of like writing exercises thing. So I converted one of them called Purity to a 4-issue miniseries. Sent it to him. He liked it. They published it. Kickstart Entertainment, who did Wanted with Angelina Jolie, did Preacher, The Boys, all that. They optioned it, took it, went wide with it, about 150 table reads, with different producers and things. Didn't go anywhere, so they rewrote it with Hollywood writers. I didn't like what they wrote, but, at the time I did. You don't know what you don't know, right? So I'm
right.
Yeah, so I was like, so I'm like, okay, whatever. I kind of felt it lost the human element kind of deal, but went with it. It ended up in turnaround hell and just died a slow, painful death. Kind of fell out of writing too. Mike Penny, the owner of Dakawaka, he passed away in 2009. So it was just, I was kind of burnt out on everything. It's just kind of too much for me at the time. Then in about, what was it, Mosley, 2018, 2019, 2020?
It was 18, it was 18, 19, somewhere in there.
It was before the pandemic, right? Or was it during? I can't remember.
It was right before the pandemic started. And the whole reason we got to be where we're at is because we had so much time to write.
Right.
Yeah, right. All that extra
What else
time.
were we going to do, right?
Yeah, right.
But Mosley kicked around this idea, and he sent me this idea, and I was like, and how I am, and my wife hates this about me, is if somebody gives me an idea, I got to think about it for 3 or 4 days before I'm going to come back to you and say, good idea, bad idea, that kind of thing, if we can approve it. So he thought I hated it because I didn't say anything to him for like 3 or 4 days. I was like, hey, that idea got stuck in my head. Here's the first 8 pages. So I sent it to him, and we were off and running. So,
wow. Yep. Yeah. That's the worst too, when you send off an idea and you're like waiting for someone to review it, and you're like, I don't know, I haven't heard back in 3 days. And then you message them like, dude, I'm reading like 60 other scripts. I'll get to it. It's like, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Right. So now, Rion, what about you with all that? How did it start for you?
Yeah. So I grew up, my dad was in the Army, and so I moved around quite a bit. So I didn't have like a set group of friends that I was growing up with, but the one thing that was pretty constant in like the post exchange was all Marvel and DC comics were every month were in the PX. So while my family went and shopped, I have 3 sisters. I don't have any brothers.
Yep.
While they went and shopped, I would go and read comics, and that's kind of where the love for comics came from. And in fact, when I really started to get into them was when Jim Lee was leading X-Men, right? X-Men #1 when he like all that like it blew my mind because it was so different from everything else that was kind of out there, and it was just so. It was from that point on, it's just like anything that was comic related, it was something that I was going to be interested in, right? Like, so this is the late 80s, you know. So I mean, Batman, the first Batman 89 came out like not too long after that, or right before that, right? So like that kind of all that stuff kind of just melded together, and it just, you know, it was a love affair kind of, you know, that I just kept on I mean, I'm nearly 50 years old now, but I still read comic books pretty regularly. You know what I'm saying? Like,
right.
It's something that became just part of who I am. And so when that happens, right, you're reading all these comic books, you start to like, hey, maybe I could write a story. Right. And so this is something that Shawn didn't touch on. Like I've taken creative writing classes in college and things like that. And so like, that's always something I've done is I've been a storyteller, and Shawn and I used to work pretty closely together. Like, I mean, there was, I guess we counted a stretch of like maybe 4 years where I think we saw each other like 5 days a week for like 4 or 5 years. Like it, and then there was times it was even more than that because the nature of the business that we were in, it demanded us to, because we were kind of frontline managers. So we'd have to be there a lot and for long days and things like that. And so like I was, you know, I've always kind of just wrote stories and things like that just for myself. I'd never really published anything. And I had this idea, and I'm like, I didn't really know like who to talk to. But then I remembered a conversation that we had. I found out that Shawn had published a comic book in 2009. I'm like, what? And so like I read it and I loved it. And I was like, hey, you should do this more. And, you know, he's like, no, I'm not really into it. So that's like, you know, 9 years prior. Right. So, and then I get this idea, and I'm like, I'm right there. Like, I know this is a good idea. This is something that nobody else has out there right now, you know, and I really think that we could probably do something pretty cool with it. But I couldn't think of anybody to like tell it to. Like my wife, she doesn't care, you know, so it's like, she's like, yeah, that's great. Sounds cool to me. Right.
Yeah. Go ahead. Do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, and then it dawned on me, I'm like, Shawn like published a while back, like maybe he has like some contacts or something that I could talk to or figure this out. And so, you know, when I started talking to him, he's like, yeah, well, pitch me the story. I'm like, okay, you know. And so I go through it, and we have maybe an hour, maybe not quite an hour conversation, like all these different ideas that I had in my head. And it just wasn't like it was nearly there. It just wasn't quite exactly what you have right now. And so I pitched it to Shawn, and he's like, huh, you know, sounds cool, you know, kind of like just kind of kicked me off a little bit. And
leave me alone, kid. You bother me.
Yeah.
I picture Shawn just being like, okay, and then walking out of the room and then returning 3 days later to be like, oh, it's kind of cool. I like this.
Kicking his door. Mosley, that idea you had.
So that's, you know, you think it's funny, but that's kind of the way it was. Like, like he basically like, huh. And then we don't talk for like 2 or 3 days. And then he like calls me back because we're living in 2 different states by then.
Yeah.
He's like, you know, that idea we were talking about. He's like, I love it. It's a great idea. Here's the first 8 pages.
Wow.
You know, and so like from that point on, like we communicate all the time about the story. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we took probably, I don't know, maybe 18 months, like just storyboarding different ideas and coming up with different characters and things like that. And then, you know, there's the story itself it's huge. It's broad, but the one, like we kept on like trying to like kind of sculpt it down to like the part that we found that was probably the furthest along in the story. And that's Tam's story. Right. But there's parts of the story that go back, you know, like in our history, like 10,000 years. And like, I think we have like maybe 800 years into the future, even after what happens to Tam's story. So like but Shawn's kind of laser focused on telling Tam's story right now. And I'm kind of storyboarding, like I'm doing some of the backstory and for one of the main characters right now. And that's kind of what I've been working on while Shawn's been doing this. And we still talk about Tam stuff, but like we're at that point right now. How many Shawn, how many episodes or issues do we have in the can right now?
There's 22 of Immortalis, and we got 3. We can't. Maybe you guys can help us. We're trying to find a story for it. Right now, we're workshopping Immortalis side quests, but we can't figure out. It's like an anthology of 3 stories of the characters, but we can't figure out what to call it. So
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
so like 25 issues ready to go right now. So
that's
So
awesome.
so we're pretty deep into it, right? But there's so much more story to tell.
Or?
Fully scripted. Right now, we just sent Harry at Marcosia. We just sent him completed issue 6 through 9 for the next trade paperback. After that, we're thinking we're going to do the anthology with the 3 side quest stories until we find a better name. And then we're going to do probably issue 10 through 15 for the next trade paperback. So but yeah, 22
your 9 issues
scripted.
Content complete.
Correct.
And then
correct.
Okay. Sorry,
Wow.
Ryan, to cut you off. I just wanted to.
Oh no.
That.
Yeah. That's a lot of content you guys have put together.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, like Ryan said, we before we even sought an artist, we spent 16 months just doing the overall arc of the story. And it was kind of weird because we knew, with Scout, Boom, Dynamite, all those at the time that, they're looking for 6 to 8 issues at a time. They don't want to do a 6 to 8 year run, right? I mean, nobody wants to invest that much time and energy into it, but we knew if we wanted to tell the story we wanted to tell, it'd be like 6 to 8 years.
Yep.
So yeah, we kept arcing it, getting it all together, character build outs, bios, all that stuff to get to the point where we're like, okay, now we can find an artist. So yeah.
Wow. And right now you're at a point, I mean, you've done some Kickstarters in the past with the project, but you're at the point now where you can fully publish a volume 1, which is 5 issues, 6 issues.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So give us because you talked about Tam a little bit, so we haven't really got into like what the story is. I know you talk about gods and heaven and hell and things like that. So I know there's probably more complexity to the story than that, but okay. What is this? What is Immortalis?
The basic elevator pitch is a war between heaven and hell and the old gods of myth. The old gods of myth, as they slowly faded away from monotheism, the Aztec, Greek, Roman gods, Celtic gods, they all kind of faded into the background. Well, they didn't go away, and now they're trying to come back and destroy heaven and hell so they can come back and be prominent. So, yeah, that's the overall elevator pitch for it, kind of. So,
okay. And where does Tam fit in all that? She's the main character we're following.
So in issue 1, this was another thing, a weird thing that we did. I know, because I mean, we made so many missteps when we started. Because with Dakawaka, I had a publisher. I just sent him stories, and he would find the artists and all that stuff, letters, colors, all that. So we were having to do that all on our own for the Kickstarters and stuff. But so in the very first issue, we didn't want it to seem like a historic piece, but the very first issue is Tam's father is in the British Surrey militia. He's in India. He gets attacked by the I guess you call them natives back in the day, you know what I mean? The Indian people.
Mujahideen.
The Mujahideen, yeah. So and as he's about to get killed, he throws up a plea to heaven and hell. He's like, heaven, if you won't help me, then maybe hell can get me out of this. Well, they take him up on it. And 3 years later, an angel and a demon come and appear to him and say, all right, you remember that plea you made to us? We're here to collect. We want your first child. And he's like, well, I don't have any children. And they're like, well, you will. So that's where Tam comes about. So
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that's how she gets roped into the mix.
Right.
Yeah.
She's an unwilling participant. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Right. That's a big part of the story too. She's like, I didn't do any of this shit. Why am I?
Yeah. Right.
Well, and the thing is that she's actually the prophecies were a little bit skewed, so she's actually out of her time, right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is we had to somehow get her to the modern era from where she grows up in the early 1800s, the Victorian era England, right?
Yep.
And she's trained by certain elements that the gods or heaven and hell kind of set aside for her, so that she learns how to become what she's supposed to be, which is the one true deicide. And but then as they're studying the prophecy, they realize that she's early, and so that so that becomes a big issue, a big problem for her, and it's part of the story, and then she somehow winds up in modern time, and we had to put a team around her. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is one of the questions that I posed to Shawn early on was like, what if we made all of like the guys that we typically think that are bad guys, the good guys, right? So you have a vampire, you have like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, you have like a dragon warrior, you know, with like ancient ancestors in his head, and you have an immortal, right? So you have all these guys that have typically in our culture have been bad guys, and we're putting them on the good side. So they have like all these like supernatural type abilities that help Tam do her job. So, but there's not all to that's not all to the story. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens, but it's pretty important that they are surrounding her at, you know, when the inevitable war comes, right? So she has people that she thinks she can count on, you know?
Right. Yeah. I think that's, yeah, that's pretty cool. It sounds like you have a slew of characters that sound really interesting. That I know you said you guys had written quite a few characters for the whole series and things like that.
Yeah, there's some characters that we have written that we have full bios for that aren't even really major characters in the story. Like they won't show up until a different story. They'll pop in and out of the story of Tam's story, but they're not the main focus of this story, but they will be later on or earlier, you know. So that's something else that we wanted to do. So we really wanted to weave together like a world that, you know, has specific like laws and things like that we try not to break. And, you know, one of the things that Shawn and I talk about, like, you know, in comic books, when somebody needs to fly, ultimately they just, oh, hey, look, I now have the power to fly.
Right.
We always kind of found like really ridiculous.
Yep.
So what we did is if they have some kind of supernatural ability or power, we had to explain it, right? We had to you have to understand how and why it happens. You can't just say, oh, well, look, it's a mutated gene. Now I have the power of pieces, you know, or anything like that. Like there had to been something they either acted upon or their environment made them the way that they are. You know what I'm saying? Yep. So that's stuff that we really wanted to hone in on, and it really kind of helps us write the story, because we try to want to base all this stuff, even though it's, you know, we're talking about like mythology and we're talking about monsters and all this stuff. We really kind of wanted to base it into like a reality so that we didn't like break the bounds, you know, to kind of make the story relatable and believable, you know?
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Definitely. So when you're like, Shawn, you were talking about how before you were just handing in scripts and being like, just make it, and now you have to do a whole lot more. How did that process go for you, and who ended up being the art team you worked with?
So again, like I said, we didn't know what we didn't know. We wanted to tell the story we wanted to tell. So the first issue kind of came off like a historical piece because it's about Tam's father. The second issue is about the rest of the team being assembled, and Tam doesn't even appear in issue number 2. So we actually hired an artist, Ben Perkins, out of Portland, to do issue number 3, because it's the first time that Tam and the team are all together and everything. So and that was actually a friend of a friend through Ryan's, right? Ryan,
Yep.
you knew, one of your old college classmates, I think, knew Ben.
Correct. Yep.
So we reached out to Ben. We liked Ben, like what he was doing. He had a bunch of projects in the fire, a bunch of stuff going on. So he did that issue 3 for us just to get it out there. And yeah, the whole process, man, it was so eye-opening, because we were doing, you know, you got to get your inkers, your pencilers, your letterers, your colorists, your cover artists. And then after you get all that done, then you got to start your Kickstarter. You got to start doing your graphics. You got to start doing your ordering all your swag and everything you're going to have for your different levels of your Kickstarter. And it was just, man, it was crazy. So yeah, we somehow got issue 1 and 2 out there, got funded, went really well. Then did issue 3 and 4, because we're still under this crazy idea, right? That we come out, we want to do a 6 to 8 year series, which is already, you know, stacking the cards against us. Yeah. And then we're thinking not only that, but we want to do 12 issues a year, which that's just, I mean,
insane.
It's insane. Cause but I'll be honest with you. The one thing that always burned my butt was, I hate it when I get a good story on Kickstarter and I back it, and then I'm getting the next 22 pages 8 months later. I'm like, you can't
right. It
that
sucks.
Yeah, it does. I want more of that story. Bring it to me, you know?
Right.
So,
right. Oh, no. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So we just started bucking the trend. Like, listen, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it our way. We're going to go 12 issues a year. We're going to do a long series, and that's just the way we're going to do it. I mean, we either fail or we won't. So we did our first 3 Kickstarters, 6 issues, got them all out there, got them all funded. Everything was going good. And then we got lucky because our letter, Amal Desai out of Chicago, great letter, great guy. I use him anytime I can. He's like, hey, I'm submitting. He's doing his own comic called Joan Jett.
Yep.
Kind of a take on the Rocketeer kind of thing. He says, with a British publishing company called Marcosia, I think your stuff is perfect for them because, one, you got a British heroine, that kind of thing.
Yep.
So we submitted it to him. Harry loved it, signed us. We kicked the contracts back and forth a little bit. And now here we are a year in. We thought, it'd be like 3 years before we found a publisher.
Right.
We thought we were going to do the Kickstarter route, trying somehow to get out 12 issues a year for the first 3 years. And now we got a publisher. We're in Barnes & Noble, and it's just kind of, it's kind of crazy.
That's cool. And I was going to actually, that you answered the question because I was bringing up, how did you end up with a publisher in the UK? But I guess
right. Through our letter. That's the weird thing. Just like with our first artist, Ben Perkins out of Portland. I mean, me and Ryan didn't know him from Adam, and it was a friend of a friend. Same with Harry from Marcosia. It was a friend of a friend. So
that's cool.
So even though we weren't big in the comic scene, I mean, everybody's super awesome, super nice, and everybody kind of supports each other. So
yeah, and secondarily too, like finding the right artist too is like it proved to be a bigger challenge than we realized. I mean, we found Ben. We were fortunate, but it wasn't like we found Ben overnight. Like I had to go through the friend list on Facebook and be like, hey, does anybody know a comic book artist? Like, I've looked on Reddit a little bit. I hadn't had much success there, and so we didn't really know anybody. And so I had a guy, one of my friends. He teaches art in high school in Florida. And so he knew Ben somehow, and that's how we got together, right? And so, but we knew that Ben wasn't going to be able to do the workload that we needed him to do. And so, we still, even after we found him, we had to find other artists as well. One of the artists that Shawn had worked with previously, he loved it. In fact, it's one of our it's our logo, right? He's the one that put it together, and
that's cool.
It's pretty crazy too, because that's a whole nother story. But we pitched him the idea, and the next day he had already drawn all the picture out and sent it back to us, and here's my concept of what I'm seeing. That's how quickly it was. But we had to find artists, and one of the luxuries that we have now is that we've worked with so many. Shawn and I can sit down and say, hey, so and so is good at writing or doing action. Let's give him issue 6 because it's got a lot of action, right? Or this is more of a historical piece, so why don't we give this to so and so? You know what I mean? We're able to do that, and which is it's actually proven to be a nice luxury for us,
Yeah, that's great.
It's kind of good and bad though, because here's the thing too, that we approach this from a floppy perspective, right? We were talking 22 pages, 2 issues at a time. We're fanboys. We want to do floppies. That's what we grew up reading. That's what we want to do, right?
Yeah.
So now with Marcosia, they're like, yeah, we can go down to 40 pages, but we like to keep it a little bit higher. So it's now we're looking. We gotta kind of shift gears and do 4 or 5 issue blocks at a time. So that's kind of changed our whole process too. We're trying to keep at least 2 issue artists together. You know what I mean? So we can kind of keep the art kind of similar, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, you can see Ben's art definitely is different from anybody else that we used.
Yeah.
But also we really dug what he was doing,
Yeah.
So that's the difference is, we're just able to use all these great artists that we've just met by doing this,
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's awesome that you got those connections.
So you guys talked a little bit about that, the anthology you're trying to put together as a part of this universe. Is that something where you guys are going to write the whole thing and just try to find other artists? Or are you trying to bring in friends and other writers to help make it?
No. So that's the weird thing about that, right? Ryan talks about how this kind of universe kind of took on a life of its own and just kept getting bigger and bigger, For the anthology, we made these mercenary characters. They're the heartless bastards. They're the living embodiment of the Egyptian canopic jars, right? So you got, one's got the falcon head, baboon head, jackal head, and the Isis head. we were like, why don't we make living embodiments of those, and give them like superpowers, like they're almost minor daddies kind of thing. So we did that, and we had them in issue number 12, which currently Lucas Assis, one of our artists, is working on right now to finish that up. And we're like, man, they were just so interesting characters, because they're just I've never seen anybody do that with the Konami jars, bring them to life kind of thing.
Right.
So then I just started outlining the story. And the next thing you know, I'm writing like, it starts off in Cuba, then jumps to Yemen, and then jumps to the Vatican City for these guys, these mercenaries. And and I was like, and then I look up and I'm like 45 pages in, and I've got a whole 2-issue series run. I'm like, no, I want to stick that in an anthology.
Right.
So we're writing it all, but we're using different artists. So
okay.
It's like there's so much depth to like these old mythological gods and stuff, and just so much weird stuff that used to happen. If you look at what happened with Zeus and stuff, he was not a good guy, man.
Oh no, he's a piece of shit. Yeah.
He was he was a POS for sure. And so it's just there's so much to it. And like, so we did Shawn, the ferryman of the dead, right? He ferries the dead, all that. In our times, we brought him in. He's like a freaking overweight truck driver type guy. You know what I mean? So it's just, there's just so many things and cool things you can do with it and stuff. So
that's awesome.
It just kind of takes on a life of its own. And I'm having a great time writing this. So
one of my favorite stories actually is in the anthology too. It's one of the main characters winds up in the Old West, and maybe happens across a traveling band of vampires.
Right.
And
Nice.
it's nothing I've ever seen before, but it is so interesting. It's a great story, and it really fits well with like the story that we're telling for Tam right now, right? So obviously it's one of the immortal characters, right? So we were able to put him in the Old West, and he's not really like a gunslinger, but like he's around them, And so just seeing him chase after vampires in the Old West is something I don't think I've ever really seen anywhere.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Chris is interested. He said vampires, so he's
I'm always in for vampires.
Hey, there you go. Can't go wrong.
I'm excited, guys. I'm glad we got to sit and chat. I know the Immortalis Volume 1, it's going to be in shops January 30th.
Yep.
So as this episode comes out, everybody, it'll be in shops already.
Yes.
And it was up for pre-order, but you can get it through Marcosia's website, right? Amazon, Barnes and Noble, you said, which is that's awesome. When you go in Barnes and Noble, you see like your book on a shelf there. That's gonna
I know that's gonna be one of those. I'm just gonna lay down on the floor and just kind of fan myself.
You're gonna stand in the comic section and be like, "Do you want me to sign that? Do you want me to sign that?"
I'm not even gonna ask. I'm just taking a Sharpie and start signing stuff.
Just hold the book up, be like, "Here you go. This is a good one. I recommend this."
I'm gonna buy them and start giving them to people at the door already signed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Can I give one more for Shawn real quick before we go?
Oh yeah.
So you had those old books that you did for what was the name of that publisher?
So it was Kickstart Entertainment, which I know it's weird because it was.
Yeah.
I hooked up with them in 2005, and then about 2009, Kickstarter started. But it was Kickstart Entertainment. There was a super awesome lady named Samantha Olsen Shear. I think she's with Zynoscope now. She kind of championed us with them, and she was awesome for trying to get it out there.
So they're defunct now, right?
No, they're still going on. They do Voltron stuff. They did Doc McStuffins. They do the boys now. So
are you talking about Dakawaka though? Is that was?
No,
yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, Dakawaka's defunct. Mike Penny, who he had cerebral palsy, he passed away in 2009. He did more with less than I'll ever be able to do in 80 freaking years. So
yeah.
Do you know? Do you know in that scenario, like who owns your books?
So funny story. I was talking to Ryan about this because we were talking about re-releasing Purity somehow tied to Marcosia because, and I believe it's in 2018 the rights came back to me. So after 10 years,
Okay.
And what's great about that is it was Mike had actually found an up-and-coming Andres Guanaldo who went on to do Wonder Woman, Captain America. There's a bunch of DC and Marvel stuff. Did Gotham City Sirens, Justice League Dark, did all that stuff. So yeah, we got some art by him. And I'm just like trying to figure out the right time to re-release it and put it out there and kind of get that going. So
the nice part too is we can use that as a secondarily and tie it back into the story. So which is what we've already done. Honestly, it's in the anthology. So.
Ryan just read it. So spoiler, I just sent him the finished copy of the Heartless Bastard story in there, and I use in Purity, the main hero has these 2 pistols given to him by Heaven and Hell, Thy Holy Cannon and Angel Duster, and they show up in that Heartless Bastard story. So yeah,
cool.
Kind of a callback.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's cool. It's a deep cut for anybody that read the Purity. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome. That you put stuff in there.
It's a deep cut for Sean's hardcore fans.
Right. All 2 of them.
Yeah,
we will find you.
Hey, there's more of those than just me. So
yeah, each other's biggest fan. That's awesome.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
I just think of Arrested Development. There's dozens of us.
Right. Tens of us will be coming after you.
Hell yeah.
Tens of us.
Awesome.
No, that's awesome. I love to hear that the rights went back to.
Yeah, that's very cool that happened. You can bring that in with your other stories too.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks again for being here. Shawn and Rion, if you guys, our listeners, our viewers, want to follow you and the stuff you're doing, is there anywhere you want to send them specifically, like social media, stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. So we have our own website. We actually have our own logo.
Nice.
MNL Comics. It's at mandl.com or mandlcomics.com, right? That's that website. And then you can follow us on MNL on Facebook, and then there's Immortalis on Twitter X, and then Tam Immortalis on Instagram. Those are the socials that we have right now.
Very good.
And that it's great stuff. We one of our PR people and marketing, they're helping us out, and big shout out to Catherine, who's really kind of taking that over for us. And like, we actually have like regular content now, which is something we didn't really have before.
Nice. That's
Right.
awesome.
That's what they don't tell you when you're trying to do a comic, right? And you're trying to do the Kickstarter route. You got to do artist letters, colorist, find a publisher, build it all out, do all the graphics, do all this. So it's like, who's got time for social media,
Yeah.
Exactly. So she's really done a lot of stuff for us, and so we definitely we appreciate that, but we actually have active socials, which is something we from the beginning, like this, we tried, but like that wasn't a part of our Kickstarter. This is just something that we've recently just started really pushing on. And so like, we have active stuff. It has our new Comic-Con schedule where we'll be this year, and
cool.
Anything else that comes up like this, we'll link to your interview and any of the other interviews that we've done and things like that. You can find it on our socials now. So pretty excited about that. Yeah,
that's great. That's great to have that support. It makes a big difference.
Yep.
Shawn, do you have any to pimp out for?
No, just if you want to get the book, and if you have a specific place, Barnes & Noble, you can always link to that through Marcosia.com. He has all of them, Books of Me and Drive Through Comics. All that is linkable through that website on Marcosia. Just go to Marcosia and search Immortalis.
Awesome.
And choose your favorite vendor, and you'll be good to go.
Hell yeah.
And to everybody out there watching and or listening, I'll have some of those websites in the show notes down below, so you don't have to search anything and just click.
There you go. Thank you.
Awesome.
Click the button.
Click the button.
So make sure you do that, and then check out the book because it sounds awesome and it looks awesome. And you guys have been a blast to talk to. So we definitely have to do it again sometime. And best of luck with the launch.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much,
Chris. Thanks, Mike.
Appreciate it.